Sarah Turner's perfect life was built on rules set by the HOA that promised safety, order, and peace. But everything changes when she receives a letter demanding the destruction of the garden she's poured her heart into. What seems like a simple dispute soon unravels into something far darker. As Sarah digs deeper into the HOA's hidden past, she discovers a web of manipulation, surveillance, and control stretching back decades, one that has been quietly shaping the lives of every resident, including her own. The most shocking revelation? Her father, whom she thought had died, is at the very heart of it all. The architect of a system designed to control the entire neighborhood. Now Sarah must confront a legacy she never wanted and decide whether to fight back against her own blood. The battle for her home becomes a fight for survival in a world where trust is a lie and nothing is as it seems. The HOA Conspiracy, A Web of Secrets, Part 1, The Unraveling begins. It was an ordinary afternoon when Sarah Turner first received the letter. The envelope, marked with the HOA's official seal, arrived just as she was finishing her lunch, unaware that it would change everything. Sarah had always been a model homeowner. She followed the HOA rules, paid her dues on time, and kept her garden immaculate. The letter, however, didn't concern her lawn or driveway. It was about her garden. The HOA demanded that she remove her beloved flower bed, stating that it violated aesthetic guidelines. But it wasn't just any letter, it was a threat. A fine of $500 was imposed, with the condition that she'd be fined an additional $250 per day for every day the garden remained in place. She couldn't believe it. Her garden wasn't an eyesore. It was a sanctuary of vibrant colors and fragrant blooms, a personal project she'd poured her heart into. Why would the HOA suddenly go to such extreme lengths to remove it? That night, Sarah tossed and turned in bed. She knew the HOA had been strict, but this felt different, more sinister. After all, there were countless other houses in the neighborhood with gardens that weren't as pristine as hers. So why was hers targeted? It made no sense. Determined to get answers, Sarah decided to visit the HOA office the next morning. As she arrived, she found the door locked. No one answered the phone either. The silence felt off. She didn't know who to trust anymore. Her suspicion grew even stronger when, while gardening the following weekend, she unearthed something strange: a key. It wasn't just any key. It was old, rusted, and marked with strange symbols. She stared at it, confused. Why would there be a key buried in her garden? Was this just some kind of coincidence, or was it connected to the HOA's strange demands? Part 2, Mark's discovery. A few streets down, Mark Reynolds had just moved into the neighborhood. As a retired military officer, Mark was used to following rules, but he quickly became uncomfortable with the way the HOA was controlling every aspect of life in the neighborhood. Mark had installed a state-of-the-art security system in his home, complete with cameras to monitor his property. It wasn't out of paranoia, he just wanted to keep things safe. But when the HOA issued a letter demanding he remove the cameras, he was taken aback. The letter cited aesthetic violations, claiming that the cameras didn't fit the community aesthetic. Something didn't sit right with Mark. He fought back, sending emails and hiring a lawyer to challenge the decision. But it wasn't long before the HOA escalated things. He started receiving strange phone calls, silent calls, followed by cryptic messages. It was as if they were watching him, manipulating every move he made. Late one evening, Mark decided to follow a trail of odd behavior. He had noticed a figure at the last HOA meeting, someone always in the background, never speaking. Curious, Mark decided to find out who this person was. He followed the figure discreetly, leading him to a strange, nondescript building at the edge of the neighborhood. As he got closer, he overheard a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. The leader's return is imminent. Once the system is reset, we will begin anew. The leader? Mark had no idea what that meant, but he had a feeling that the HOA was hiding something much bigger than just garden rules or security cameras. Part 3. Ava's Infiltration. Meanwhile, Ava Clark, a journalist known for her investigative skills, had recently moved into the neighborhood under the guise of researching local politics. But as soon as she arrived, she was drawn to the strange influence the HOA had over the residents. She'd heard whispers about them, rumors that painted the HOA as a shadowy group with more power than anyone realized. Ava, ever the skeptic, couldn't resist the pull of a good story. She started attending HOA meetings under the pretense of reporting on local issues. But the more she observed, the more disturbed she became. The HOA was not just about lawn care and community standards. They were running the neighborhood with a level of control that seemed far beyond what a normal homeowners association should have. Some residents were fined for the slightest infractions, while others seemed to be untouchable. One night, after a particularly tense meeting, Ava overheard a conversation between two HOA members that made her blood run cold. They were discussing a series of shadow contracts and land deals that had been made with wealthy investors. The purpose? To gentrify the neighborhood and push out anyone who didn't meet the HOA's ideal standards. But the darkest part of the conversation was about a hidden vault beneath the neighborhood. A vault filled with documents that could expose the HOA for what it really was. Ava's heart raced as she realized that the HOA wasn't just a neighborhood organization. It was a criminal syndicate, with its fingers in far too many pies. She knew she had to get to the bottom of it, but the deeper she dug, the more dangerous things became. Every step she took seemed to lead her further into the maze of corruption, and she was being watched. Part 4. Tom's Investigation. Tom Mitchell, a retired detective, had been living in the neighborhood for years. He was no stranger to the hidden undercurrents of power and influence. His quiet retirement was disrupted when Sarah Turner, a neighbor, asked for his help with her garden dispute. After hearing her story, Tom's instincts kicked in. This wasn't just about a garden, it was a symptom of a much larger problem. Tom had always kept to himself, but as he began investigating, he realized that this neighborhood, and by extension, the HOA, had ties to something much darker. There were discrepancies in the neighborhood's history, missing records, and strange patterns of behavior. The more Tom dug, the more he uncovered about the land deals and backroom agreements that the HOA had brokered over the years. His search led him to an old map of the Area 1 that was mysteriously marked with red circles, each one over key properties in the neighborhood. As Tom followed the path, it became clear that the HOA wasn't just controlling the people. It was controlling the land itself, manipulating who could live in the neighborhood and who had to leave. Tom knew he had to act fast. He had stumbled onto something far bigger than he'd ever imagined. But just as he was about to uncover the full extent of the HOA's plan, he found himself being followed. The HOA had noticed his investigation, and they were closing in on him. The vault beneath the neighborhood. Sarah, Mark, Ava, and Tom all began their investigations independently, but soon their paths crossed. They met in secret, each sharing their findings. The key Sarah had found in her garden, Mark's discovery of the HOA's shadowy dealings, Ava's infiltration, and Tom's research into the land deals, all of it was connected. They realized the HOA had been hiding a vault beneath the neighborhood, a vault that contained the truth behind the HOA's existence. The vault wasn't just a storage facility, it was a repository of secrets, containing documents that could expose the HOA's plans. But as they dug deeper into the mystery, they realized the vault was much more than a collection of papers. It was tied to the neighborhood's very foundation. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous things became. They were being watched. The HOA had spies everywhere. It was only a matter of time before they were caught. Part 5. The vault's secrets unveiled. Sarah, Mark, Ava, and Tom stood together in a dimly lit room, each with their findings laid out on the table. It was clear now this wasn't just a dispute about gardens or rules. This was something much darker, far-reaching, and more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. The key Sarah had unearthed wasn't a coincidence. It was a symbol, marking her as a central figure in the HOA's plans. But what were those plans? And why had the HOA targeted her? Tom, the retired detective, sifted through the papers he had gathered over the past few weeks. The vault beneath the neighborhood, it's not just about storing documents. It's about control. The HOA has kept this vault secret for decades. But the more I look at these records, the more I realize it's not just about land deals or finances. Ava nodded, her face grim. It's a system of manipulation. They've been controlling the flow of information and using the vault as leverage. The weird part is that it goes deeper than money or land. It's about who gets to live here and who gets pushed out. And for what? What are they trying to achieve? The answer, though unsettling, was now clearer than ever. The HOA's ultimate goal wasn't just to enforce rules, it was to control the entire community, manipulating residents for their own benefit, determining who could stay, who had to leave, and how the neighborhood would be reshaped. Part 6, Mark's revelation. As Mark listened to Tom and Ava's theories, his mind began to race. The more he thought about the mysterious phone calls, the silences, and the strange events that had plagued his attempts to confront the HOA, the more it felt like a pattern was emerging. The HOA wasn't just a local institution. It was the center of a network that stretched far beyond the neighborhood. Mark had already uncovered the syndicate's ties to real estate moguls, but the more he pieced together, the more he understood the true scope of their control. "They're using the neighborhood as a testing ground," he said, looking up from his notes. "It's not just about controlling land, it's about manipulating people." Ava raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. The HOA has been dictating who can live here, who can stay, and who has to leave. That's been their modus operandi. But what if the testing ground is about something far darker? What if they've been trying to control who stays and who leaves based on something other than money, something deeper?" Part 7, The Experiment. The room grew silent as Mark's words hung in the air. Tom was the first to speak, breaking the silence. "You're saying this goes beyond just property deals. This isn't just about buying and selling homes. The HOA is conducting an experiment, a social experiment where they dictate who gets to live in their ideal community and who doesn't." Ava's pulse quickened. "A social experiment? What kind of experiment?" "We're not just talking about real estate, Ava," Mark said, his voice heavy with realization. "The HOA's true purpose has always been to control the community's makeup. Think about the fines, the sudden changes in rules, the displacement of certain residents. All of this was orchestrated to create the perfect community, to test psychological control on the people who live here. They've been watching how each resident reacts to these pressures. And now they're ready to move to the next phase." Tom leaned back in his chair. "That explains the vault," he muttered. "The vault isn't just a place for documents, it's a repository of data. It's where the HOA keeps everything they've learned from each of us." Part 8, The Darker Truth. Sarah felt her heart race as she absorbed everything Mark and Tom were saying. She knew the HOA had always been controlling, but this was something far more disturbing. It wasn't just about money, land, or power. It was about control over the very fabric of society. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and resolve. Ava met her gaze. "We need to get to the vault. We need to expose the truth, everything they've hidden from the residents. But we can't do it alone. The HOA will come after us if we try to act publicly." Tom, ever the strategist, began planning. "We need to get to the vault before they realize we've figured out what they're up to. It's only a matter of time before they realize we're connected. If they do, they'll use any means necessary to stop us." Suddenly, the room's atmosphere shifted. A low hum of tension filled the space. They weren't just fighting for the truth anymore. They were fighting for their life. Part 9, The First Attack. It wasn't long before they realized that the HOA had discovered their plan. Late one evening, Sarah returned home to find her front door ajar. Her heart skipped a beat as she stepped inside, scanning the darkened hallway. As she moved further into the house, she noticed a small envelope on the kitchen table. It was unmarked. She opened it cautiously, her fingers shaking. Inside was a single sentence, written in bold, block letters. "Stop now, or you will regret it." The message was a threat. She had no doubt that the HOA was behind it. She grabbed her phone, trying to reach Mark and the others. But just as she dialed, she heard a noise from behind her, a shadow flitting across the hallway. A figure. Sarah froze, her breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly, heart pounding in her chest. But when she turned around, the hallway was empty. The first clue. The following morning, as Sarah met with Ava, Mark, and Tom to discuss the threat, she found something else waiting for her. A strange symbol had been carved into the side of her fence, a mark that she had never seen before. As the group analyzed it, Ava recognized it from the documents she had uncovered. "It's a symbol of control," Ava said, her voice quiet but urgent. "I've seen it before in the archives. It's tied to an ancient society, one that believed in psychological manipulation as a means of control." Tom's eyes narrowed. "That symbol isn't just a warning. It's a message." But before they could discuss further, Sarah received a call from her lawyer, a man who had been helping her navigate her HOA disputes. He sounded breathless, panicked. "They know what you're doing. They're already in your files," he said, barely able to contain his fear. "They've hacked your accounts. Get out now." The connection abruptly cut off. Part 10. Uncovering the Past. The four of them knew they had to act fast. Tom's instincts were proven correct when they discovered that the symbol Sarah found wasn't just a sign of the HOA's power, it was tied to the land's history. The symbol had been carved by the HOA's founders, who had used occult practices to secure power over the land. They weren't just interested in controlling properties, they were building something much darker. They soon uncovered that the vault contained not only documents, but sacred rituals that had been performed on the land. The HOA had been experimenting with psychic control over the residents for years. They had used the vault to catalog the psychological responses of residents to their manipulation. But there was one shocking detail they hadn't noticed before. Sarah's family had been part of the original founders. She wasn't just a random target. She was inherited for a specific reason. The HOA had plans to make her the final piece of their plan. Betrayal and escape. As the group worked to piece together the final details, they realized they were running out of time. The HOA had escalated their efforts to contain them. Every phone call, every move was being watched. And now, someone within the group had betrayed them. In a shocking twist, Mark revealed that he had been offered a position within the HOA, one that would give him access to all of their plans. It was clear now that Mark had been playing both sides, trying to protect his own interests. But the betrayal wasn't over yet. As the group turned on Mark, the HOA's enforcers arrived, forcing them to flee into the night. Part 11. Betrayal and Escape. Mark's revelation rocked the group to their core. He had been infiltrating their investigation from the start, playing both sides. While Sarah, Tom, and Ava had been working tirelessly to uncover the truth, Mark had been feeding information to the HOA in exchange for a position of power within the organization. The moment the truth came to light, the room grew tense, and a feeling of betrayal filled the air. "We trusted you, Mark," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You've been with us this whole time, and now we find out that you've been working with them?" Mark's expression was unreadable. "You don't understand. They offered me power, everything I've ever wanted. I thought I could use it to help us, to bring down the HOA from the inside. But now ... now I realize it's much bigger than I imagined. They know about all of us. Tom's jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing. So you were just using us to get closer to your own goals? Mark's shoulders sagged, the weight of his own guilt heavy on him. I didn't mean for it to get this far, but the HOA, they're not what they seem. I had no idea how deep they were into this. Before anyone could respond, there was a sudden knocking on the door. Heavy, deliberate. The sound echoed through the house like a warning. Ava moved quickly to the window and peered through the blinds. Her eyes widened in alarm. They're here. Without thinking, Sarah grabbed the papers they had gathered and stuffed them into her bag. We need to leave now. But before they could make it to the door, a group of HOA enforcers burst in, dressed in black tactical gear. They moved with military precision, surrounding the group. "No one leaves," one of the enforcers said in a low, threatening tone. Tom immediately assessed their situation. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but there was still a way out if they acted quickly. His years as a detective had taught him one thing: survival was about thinking fast. "Sarah, Ava, follow me," he whispered urgently. "Mark, if you want to get out of this, you better start helping us." Mark hesitated for a moment, torn between loyalty to his new position and the bond he had formed with the group. Finally, with a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Let's move." The group darted through the back door, narrowly escaping the clutches of the HOA enforcers. They ran through the yard, their hearts pounding, adrenaline surging through their veins. As they reached the alleyway behind the house, they heard the sound of sirens in the distance, signaling the arrival of more HOA reinforcements. Art 12, the fight for survival. Once they were safely inside a small, abandoned building a few blocks away, the group collapsed onto the floor, catching their breath. Ava's eyes were wide with fear, but there was also determination behind her gaze. What now? They know everything. We can't just run forever. Mark paced back and forth, his mind working furiously. We need to expose them. We can't hide from them, but we can destroy everything they've built. Destroy it? Sarah echoed, her voice strained with exhaustion. How are we supposed to do that? They have the entire neighborhood under their control. We've been digging at the wrong angle, Tom said, his voice steady as he leaned against the wall. We're not just fighting the HOA. We're fighting the network they've built. We need to go after their roots, the people who support them from the shadows. Ava nodded, slowly piecing it together. And where do we find those people? There's a place, Mark said quietly, as though he had just realized it himself. A secret compound. It's where the leaders of the HOA go to meet in private. It's not just for business, it's where they conduct their darkest operations. Sarah looked at him, suspicious but intrigued. You know where it is? Mark hesitated. Yes, I do. But it's not something I can just walk into. It's heavily guarded. And if they find out we're coming, they'll stop us before we even get close. Tom clenched his fists, frustration building. Then we'll have to be smarter than they are. Part 13, The Hidden Compound. The group spent the next few hours planning their next move. They knew the risk was enormous, but it was their only chance. With no time to waste, they set out in the dead of night, making their way toward the secret compound. It was located on the outskirts of town, tucked away behind a tall iron fence and surrounded by dense trees. The compound was hidden from the public eye, and few knew about its existence. As they approached, Tom took the lead, moving cautiously. They didn't know exactly what they'd find inside, but they knew it was the key to bringing down the HOA for good. The night air was thick with tension as they approached the compound's entrance, a heavily guarded gate that appeared impenetrable. How are we getting past this? Ava whispered, eyeing the guards stationed at the gate. Mark glanced around, his face tense. I've been here before. I know the security system, but we'll need to act fast. Tom nodded. We don't have much time. They made their way around the perimeter of the compound, keeping to the shadows. Mark led them to a hidden access point, a small maintenance door that was rarely used. He pulled out a device from his bag, a hack tool he had acquired during his time working with the HOA, and began fiddling with the lock. Minutes passed in silence, and then, with a soft click, the door swung open. "Go," Mark whispered. They slipped inside, their hearts racing. The compound was eerily quiet, the only sound coming from the occasional creak of the building's old walls. As they moved deeper into the compound, they came across a hallway lined with files and documents. The walls seemed to close in on them, but they pushed forward, knowing that the truth was just ahead. Part 14. The Vault Inside the Compound. At the end of the hallway, they found a large steel door, much like the one they had seen in the documents. The vault. Mark quickly examined the door, his fingers flying over the locks. It was a complex system, but he'd dealt with this kind of security before. As he worked, Tom stood guard, his eyes darting around the room for any signs of danger. Ava held her breath, wondering what they would find on the other side. With a final click, Mark stepped back and the door slowly creaked open. Inside the vault, rows upon rows of data storage units were stacked neatly against the walls. But it wasn't just the data they had come for. It was the files that lay in the center of the room, neatly organized but clearly containing everything the HOA had been hiding. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes scanning the documents. They were more than just financial records. They were contracts, corruption logs, and personal files on every resident in the neighborhood. The truth was staring them in the face, but the deeper they looked, the more disturbing it became. These weren't just business documents. They were records of manipulation, illegal evictions, and covert surveillance, all designed to ensure the HOA's control over the neighborhood and the people who live there. "This is it," Ava breathed. "This is how they've been controlling everyone. They've been keeping detailed dossiers on every resident, tracking their behaviors and manipulating them for years." But before they could make sense of the documents, a loud alarm suddenly blared, filling the room with noise. "The guards are coming," Mark shouted. "We need to get out now." The escape plan. With the alarm blaring and footsteps echoing in the distance, the group knew they had only moments to escape. They grabbed as many files as they could carry, shoving them into bags as fast as they could. The guards were closing in. They had no choice but to make a daring escape. They sprinted down the hallway, their hearts pounding in their chests. Tom led the way, his experience guiding them through the compound's maze-like corridors. Mark led them toward a hidden exit, a secret tunnel that would take them outside the compound. But as they reached the tunnel's entrance, they were confronted by two guards who blocked their path. "Stay back," one of the guards shouted, aiming his gun at Sarah. But Mark was quicker. In a split second, he tackled the guard, knocking him to the ground. "Go," he shouted. They bolted for the tunnel, adrenaline surging through their veins. They were nearly out when another guard appeared in front of them, a gun pointed directly at Sarah. In a final desperate move, Mark lunged at the guard, knocking him to the ground just as the tunnel entrance closed behind them. They had made it out. The aftermath of the escape. The night air was cold and damp as Sarah, Mark, Ava, and Tom emerged from the hidden tunnel beneath the HOA compound. Their breaths came in ragged gasps, the adrenaline still surging through their bodies. The sound of distant sirens echoed in the background, growing louder as the guards began to search for them. As they huddled together in the shadows, Sarah looked around, trying to calm herself. They had narrowly escaped with the documents that could bring the entire HOA structure crashing down. But now the real battle began. They needed to expose the truth, but the danger was far from over. "We can't go back to our homes," Tom said, his voice low and urgent. "They'll be watching us. If we're going to do this, we need a safe place to hide and plan our next move." Mark, still shaken from the close encounter, nodded. "I know a place. It's off the grid, an old safe house." I used it when I was on operations before the HOA got its claws in. It's the only place we can lay low for a while. Ava glanced at Sarah. What's the plan once we're there? Sarah looked at the bags of files in her hands. The weight of the documents felt like a burden and a blessing all at once. We need to go through these files. They contain everything, the contracts, surveillance records, everything they've been hiding. But we can't do it alone. We need allies. They made their way to the safe house, a small secluded cabin on the outskirts of town. As they approached, Sarah felt a sense of dread settle in her stomach. The safe house had once been a place of refuge, but now it felt like a trap, a place where they were contained. Just like the neighborhood had been under the HOA's control. There was no escaping the truth now they were in too deep. Part 16, The Deep Dive. Inside the safe house, the group spread out the documents across the table. Files upon files, contracts, old photographs, and records of strange meetings littered the surface. The deeper they looked, the more they uncovered. "This is incredible," Ava said, flipping through one of the files. "They've been keeping tabs on residents for decades. These aren't just financial records, they're personal. They know everything about everyone, where they work, where they go, who they talk to." Mark sat back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "That's not the worst part. Look at this." He pointed to a series of surveillance logs detailing the daily activities of certain residents. But the logs didn't just monitor mundane activities, they recorded emotional responses. "They've been tracking how we feel, how we react to stress, to pleasure, to fear," Mark said, his voice filled with disbelief. "It's all part of their psychological control strategy. They've been using behavioral psychology to manipulate the community." Tom leaned in, his expression serious. "This isn't just a neighborhood dispute, it's an experiment. They've been testing how far they can push people, how much control they can exert." Sarah flipped through more documents, her hands trembling as she read. This doesn't make any sense. They've been pushing out residents who didn't conform, replacing them with others who fit their perfect community model. They've been controlling the makeup of the entire neighborhood. Ava nodded grimly. "They're shaping this place into their vision of an ideal society. But there's something even darker here. The files show that the HOA isn't just focused on control, they're focused on power. They've been buying up properties in key locations to increase their influence." As they went through the documents, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The HOA had been systematically controlling the flow of information, carefully curating the population based on specific psychological profiles. Those who didn't fit the mold were quietly eliminated, their properties seized and sold off to the highest bidder. Part 17, The Heart of the Conspiracy. Suddenly, Mark stopped flipping through the files and looked up, his face pale. "I found something." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Mark opened a thick folder, his fingers pointing to a series of names and dates. "These aren't just names of random residents. These are people who were brought here for a specific reason, people who were handpicked. And every one of them is connected to one person, the leader." The room fell silent. The name echoed in their minds. The leader. The person who had been orchestrating the entire HOA operation. The shadowy figure who controlled everything from behind the scenes. Ava leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Who was the leader? Tom's eyes darkened. The leader is more than just a figurehead. They're the one who controls everything. The HOA's real power rests in the hands of this person. And they've been hiding their identity for decades. Sarah shuddered. "If we find the leader, we find the heart of this whole thing." Mark nodded, but finding them won't be easy. The leader is a master of disguise, pulling the strings from the shadows. They've made sure that no one can trace their actions back to them. The documents we have now are just a piece of the puzzle. Ava stood up, pacing. "We need to get to the root of this. We need to find out who the leader is and how they've managed to hide their identity for so long. Once we do that, we can expose them and end this whole operation. Part 18. The search for the leader. The next few days were a blur of activity as the group continued their search. They scoured through more files, made connections between the HOA's operations and local businesses, and pieced together the puzzle. But no matter how much they uncovered, they couldn't find anything definitive about the leader's identity. Sarah sat alone late one night, flipping through a stack of documents. Her eyes were heavy from exhaustion, but she couldn't stop. There was something in these papers that was still missing something crucial. Then, as her eyes scanned a particularly old file, something caught her attention. The handwriting on the margins was familiar. She knew it from somewhere. Her breath hitched as she realized what it was. The handwriting, she muttered to herself. It's the same as on the envelope I received from the HOA, the one with the threat. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the terrifying truth. The leader was someone she knew. Someone who had been a part of her life long before this nightmare began. Part 19. The shocking revelation. Sarah rushed to the others, her mind reeling with the revelation. I know who the leader is. Ava, Tom, and Mark turned to her, their faces filled with concern. It's Sarah's father, Tom said slowly, piecing the puzzle together. He was involved in the HOA from the very beginning. He was one of the original founders. Sarah looked up at him, shock washing over her face. My father? But he's dead. He died years ago, Mark grimaced. That doesn't mean he's not involved. There's a reason he left you the house, and a reason why the HOA has been targeting you. Your father wasn't just a founder, he was the architect of the HOA's control system. Ava's eyes widened. So your father is the leader? Sarah sat back, stunned by the implication. She had always believed her father's death was the end of his legacy. But now she realized that his influence had extended far beyond the grave. The HOA's control had been passed down to his legacy, his daughter. She had been groomed for this moment all along. The hidden truth. As the pieces clicked into place, Sarah felt the weight of the truth settle upon her shoulders. She had been part of the HOA's plan all along, even if she hadn't known it. And now, the final step was clear. She would have to take control of the HOA, or destroy it entirely. The choice was hers, but the consequences would be immense. We need to confront the HOA, Sarah said, her voice steady but determined. We need to end this, once and for all. But as she looked at the documents in front of her, she realized that the path to freedom wouldn't be easy. The HOA had already infiltrated every aspect of her life, and the deeper she went, the more dangerous things became. Part 20. The final confrontation. The truth had finally come to light. Sarah's heart raced as the realization dawned on her. The leader of the HOA was none other than her father, a man she thought was dead for years. The revelation felt like a punch to the gut. All this time, the HOA's control, their manipulation, their strange rituals, had been built on his legacy, her legacy. We need to go back, Sarah said, standing up, the weight of the moment heavy on her shoulders. We need to end this now. Ava, Mark, and Tom exchanged concerned glances. The stakes had never been higher. They all knew what this meant. To destroy the HOA's control, they would have to confront Sarah's father, or at least his shadow, the monstrous legacy he had left behind. He's the one who orchestrated everything, Tom said, his voice filled with disbelief. He created this system of control, and now his daughter is caught in the middle of it. Sarah took a deep breath. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can stop it. You can, Mark said, his voice steady and reassuring. You're the key. You're the one they've been waiting for. Ava nodded in agreement. You're the one who can destroy the system. Your father's legacy ends with you. The words struck Sarah like a hammer. She had to confront her father's legacy, but at what cost? The neighborhood, the residents, the people she loved, None of them could ever be free as long as the HOS grip remained in place. Part 21. The Road to the HOA's Heart. The group set out in the dead of night, determined to reach the heart of the HOA's power, the central headquarters. It was a place of mystery, hidden deep within the complex, where the leader had never been seen but always controlled. The streets were eerily quiet as they made their way toward the building, a tall, imposing structure that loomed over the neighborhood like a fortress. The air was thick with tension, and Sarah felt the weight of her decision on her shoulders. This was it. If she didn't destroy the HOA now, they would continue their reign of terror, manipulating the lives of everyone in the community. As they approached the building, they noticed the increased security. The HOA had clearly been expecting them, and every move was being watched. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as they made their way past the guards, taking a hidden path Mark knew well. They reached the entrance to the HOA's inner sanctum, the heart of the operation. The door was massive, reinforced with steel, and seemed impenetrable. Mark pulled out a small, high-tech device from his bag and set to work on the lock. "Come on, Mark, hurry up," Ava urged, her voice filled with urgency. With a final click, the door creaked open, and they stepped inside. The room was cold, sterile, and devoid of any warmth. It was clear that the HOA had been keeping their operations here for years, hidden away from the world. The walls were lined with screens, computers, and files. "This is it," Sarah said quietly. "This is where it all ends." They moved through the maze of technology and records, searching for the heart of the system. But as they reached the central hub, a familiar voice stopped them dead in their tracks. "Welcome, Sarah," the voice said, cool and calculating. Sarah froze. The voice was unmistakable. It was the voice of her father, or what was left of him. Part 22. The Leader's Reveal. They turned to find a figure standing in the shadows, his face obscured by the dim lighting. The figure stepped forward, revealing a man with an unsettling, almost otherworldly presence. It was Sarah's father, or rather, a version of him older, more sinister, but unmistakably the same. "Father," Sarah whispered, her voice shaking, "but you how?" Her father smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was cold, calculating. "I never truly left, Sarah. I've been waiting for you. You see, you were always meant to be the one to carry on my work." "Your work?" Sarah's voice trembled with anger. "You've destroyed everything, our neighborhood, our lives. How could you do this?" Her father's smile deepened. "I didn't destroy anything, Sarah. I created something. The HOA is my creation, my perfect community. It was always meant to be this way. I was preparing the world for a new order, a better order. And now, with you by my side, we can finish what we started." Ava stepped forward, her voice filled with disgust. "You're a monster. You've controlled people's lives, manipulated them into thinking they were free. You've played God with them." Sarah's father didn't flinch. "Control isn't evil, Ava. It's necessary. People can't be trusted to make their own decisions. They need someone to guide them, to show them the right path." Mark clenched his fists, stepping forward. "You're insane. This isn't about guiding people. This is about enslaving them. You've been using your power to keep them trapped, to make them conform." Her father's eyes gleamed. "It's not enslavement. It's order. And it's the only way to ensure the survival of humanity." Part 23. The Final Choice. The tension in the room was unbearable. Sarah's father was standing there, fully expecting her to join him, to accept the truth of his twisted vision. But she couldn't. She couldn't align herself with the monster who had torn apart the very fabric of their community. The thought of being a part of his plan, of continuing the legacy he had left behind, made her sick. "No," Sarah said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "I won't be a part of this. I won't let you destroy everything for your own gain." Her father's expression twisted into something dark and dangerous. "You have no idea what you're saying. You're mine, Sarah. You always have been. The words sent a chill down Sarah's spine. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deep breath, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. She had to destroy it all, this twisted, corrupt system that had taken everything from her. "Then I guess this is where it ends," Sarah said firmly, stepping forward. With one swift motion, she reached for the data center, her hand smashing the final button that would trigger the system's destruction. Lights flickered, alarms went off, and the room shook as the entire HOA control system began to crumble. Her father's eyes widened in shock. "No, you can't." But it was too late. The files, the data, everything the HOA had built, it was gone. The system crashed, and the walls around them began to collapse. The illusion of control shattered in an instant. Part 24. The Aftermath. Sarah, Mark, Ava, and Tom stood in the ruins of the HOS headquarters, breathing in the silence that followed the chaos. The nightmare was over. They had destroyed the system, but the damage done to the community would take time to heal. "We did it," Ava said, her voice soft with disbelief. Tom nodded. "The HOA is finished, but it doesn't end here. We have to help rebuild." Mark placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You did what no one else could. You stopped your father's legacy from controlling people's lives." Sarah looked around at the crumbling remnants of the HOS power, knowing that the fight was far from over. But for the first time, she felt free. The community would recover, and she could finally begin to heal. Epilogue: The New Beginning. Months passed, and the neighborhood slowly began to rebuild. Without the oppressive control of the HOA, people were free to live their lives as they saw fit. Sarah, Mark, Ava, and Tom remained close, having forged a bond through their shared fight against the tyranny of the HOA. And though the damage had been done, the foundation for a new beginning had been laid. The scars of the past would never fully heal, but Sarah knew that with the truth exposed, there was a chance for the neighborhood and for herself to move forward.